There's a few things that I just want to talk about, and they sort of fall into three broad categories. First of all is around negative screening, and the idea of not putting your money into things that damage things. The next one is in the area of positive screening, i.e. seeking out areas to put your money that actually help to move things forward. Let me start with the third one, which is around what gets measured gets managed. We released a consultation document at the end of last year on whether or not we should move to a mandatory transparency regime around that as part of corporate reporting. And we had some really positive feedback that people actually do seem to want that. The second area that I want to talk about is around the negative screening. And so a lot of that work has been done actually through organizations like the Super Fund, and I know you were talking to Matt Winneray recently, and I know that there's a sort of bit of a grey area between positive and negative here, but the first rule here is sort of do no harm. That is saying, well, let's make sure that we're not putting money into things like oil and gas. You would have seen recently, of course, ACC has taken a leaf out of the Super Fund's book and has decided to start screening out fossil fuel investments over the course of the next few years, consistent with the UN FCCC report around 1.5, which is great. But we haven't yet really developed much of a market for positive positive screening, i.e. going out and hunting for low carbon investments that are going to grow the new part of the economy, the low carbon part of the economy. The main thing that I've done there, of course, is to set up the Green Investment Finance Limited, our bank, if you like, for putting money into those kinds of things, and that is just starting to pick up a head of steam. It's now made 2 investments, and we'll be looking to increase its amount of investment capital in the next term so it can do more. There was a significant green bond offer. I think it was something on the order of $200 million as part of the quantitative easing program that the Reserve Bank is engaged in recent times to deal with the COVID-19 crisis. And I would anticipate that will extend further. And I know that there are proposals floating around for a significant green bond program. And one of the interesting debates there that we're having about that in government is you've got one part of government saying, well, you don't necessarily want to bring in that many green bonds because it ties the hands of the government in terms of where that money can go. My response to that, of course, is precisely. That's exactly what you want it to do. And so we'll see how that plays out. But that will be a question, I think, for after the election, because it's one of those things where things take a little bit of time.
But the oil and gas index in the United States has dropped by 63% over the last 5 years. And the coal index has dropped by 86%. That means that anyone who's got their money in these funds is immediately losing funds, and particularly it's stark when you look at the S&P 500 in the US, having gained 48 points over those five years. So yeah. You know, the arguments that investing in fossil fuels are particularly valuable financially to the New Zealand investment sector, I don't think carry much weight.
Yeah.
James, let's move on to the positive side of the equation, and in directing finance towards sustainability and towards climate solutions.
It's actually not about the availability of capital. It's the availability of investable propositions. That's actually the side of the equation that we have the greatest problem. And the evidence of that, I guess, is we put in $100 million worth of initial capital into green investment finance. And it's only deployed a very, very small portion of that. But the issue really is, are there sufficient projects that are commercial or commercially scalable in Aotearoa at the moment that you could put your money into? And the answer at the moment is it's pretty thin. Canada, as they started to deploy stimulus capital into the economy there, they said to companies, if we're going to keep you afloat, we're going to require that you start doing TCFD reporting. So they actually made their stimulus support conditional on companies starting to do that. We're also advised from countries that have reduced their emissions over the course of the last 10 years or so, and at the same time seen economic growth. Having a price on emissions is important, but it's not determinative in terms of your success in driving change, and that you need to have what you call complementary measures, which are really about sector by sector, saying what do we need to do in this sector to drive change. And transport's number one. Every other sector of the economy, we've had roughly stable emissions over the past decade or so. Our emissions growth is driven almost entirely by transport. And it is interesting to me that there are a number of countries around the world that have said there will be a date after which you cannot buy a internal combustion engine vehicle. The most significant of those is the United Kingdom, who are also a right-hand drive country, and have said that you won't be able to buy or trade internal combustion engine vehicles after 2032. And that raises a question. What happens to the 70 million second-hand right-hand drive internal combustion engine vehicles in the United Kingdom 10 years from now?
It worries me. They're going to come over here in a flood, and they're going to be really...
Absolutely. It would be like, great, we'll just give them away free to the New Zealanders because they also drive on the same hand. So I think at the very least, we're going to need to manage imports sort of to avoid dumping of people's old fleets into our market. I suspect that we might need to say, well, actually, we won't import them from a particular date, because actually the market will simply be flooded with very, very cheap, old, dirty internal combustion engine vehicles.